Welcome everyone! In this video, we are going to be diving into my ultimate tier list for the Ultra League. Now, we are well into the Ultra League cycle, so I thought what better time to put this out than right now. So, we're going to be ranking the Ultra League meta in terms of most effective, which will be the S tier, to least effective, which is down onto the D tier, and everything in between here. So, without further ado, let's get started with this thing here. We are starting things off with Abomasnow, very solid anti-meta ice/grass type. Core breaks a lot of teams. You have to have the right team around it. I'm going to go ahead and say solid B tier. A very strong and solid XL investment. Very good core breaker. There are others that I would prioritize for sure though. But a very good core breaker if you can swing it. Altaria was questionable before the nerf. Now that they've nerfed Sky Attack, forget about it. Altaria, about as irrelevant as it gets. Even before the Sky Attack nerf, I probably still would have gone Dragonite for that sort of coverage. So it's D tier. And then we've got Articuno, very strong B tier. It was once top tier Ultra League meta many seasons back. It has fallen off quite a bit. What's holding it back is its lack of steel-type coverage, which I will agree, not every Pokemon should be able to hit their weaknesses for super effective, but that is what's holding it back. Other than that, excellent bulk, very good bulk, very solid as a lead in the Ultra League, and very much underutilized. And then we've got Aurorus. Aurorus, I would have put at the A tier in the past, but with the injection of Steelix into the meta, it has fallen off in terms of effectiveness. Still an amazing Charizard counter. There's just a lot of water, a lot of steel, a lot of fighting lurking in the Ultra League meta, which has dropped Aurorus down a peg this season, but still very good. Beatware, about as spicy as it gets. Plain and simple. Just doesn't quite have the stats. Maybe better suited for a limited meta. Same goes for Blaziken. Blaziken, much more of a ultra premier type of Pokemon. Not the most effective in the open meta. It just doesn't quite have the stats. Buzzwole, very strong. I almost want to put Buzzwole in the A tier, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. The reason why is because it addresses Steelix very well. It addresses the Swords of Justice extremely well. It's just a little bit limited up against others in the meta, such as, I would say, Giratina, of course. Tapu Fini can hardwall it. But with the right team, look out, Buzzwole can put in the work. Strong A tier. But the other Ultra Beast, Celesteela, not so much, guys. Gonna be a D tier Pokemon. It just needs a better fast move. If we can get this thing a better fast move, we'll see. But for now, it is about as spicy as it gets. Charizard, S tier. Was there any doubt, guys? Holy smokes, what an animal Charizard is. Oh my gosh. Can be very annoying if you're going up against it. It is able to effectively bait your shields with the threat of a very hard-hitting blast burn, and then once it gets those shields down, it can absolutely lay waste to an entire team. Charizard, very effective, S tier in the meta. Chestnut, I would say C tier. I would think you just go with Virizion if you want that type of typing or coverage, but if this thing were to ever get a buff to low kick, which I would absolutely love to see, you might be seeing this thing become more relevant. I would love to see them buff low kick. Not only does Chestnut get it, but a lot of other Pokemon can learn it. I would like to see it become a Poison Jab clone. And if that were to ever occur, it would be top tier meta in both the Great and Ultra League. But for now, it is not. Cobalion, A tier for sure, could easily be S tier. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say S tier. Cobalion, very strong, about as good as it gets. Yeah, I'll go ahead and give it the respect of S tier. Has the coverage, has the bulk, has the moves. What more could you ask for? Very strong fighting/steel type. And then we've got Cofagrigus. It's C tier. It's a little spicy, very pricey investment. If we can get this thing a good bait move, look out. This thing might be much higher in terms of effectiveness, but for now, if you want a bulky Shadow Claw user, I think you're just going to go with Giratina, plain and simple. Cresselia was once S tier. I'm going to go ahead and knock it down a peg to A tier. Steelix in the meta has knocked both Cresselia and Giratina down a peg in the Ultra League, which I am all for. Those two have ruled the Ultra League for far too long, but it is still very good at the end of the day. And Deoxys, also A tier for sure. Very strong psychic type. Has a little bit different coverage than Cresselia. Has the steel coverage. Still a very good anti-fighter as well. So Deoxys, very, very strong. Dragalge is a little spicy, guys. D tier. If I want a strong Dragon Tail user, I'm probably going to go with Como-O. Or just dragon type fast move pressure in general. I'm going with something like a Dragonite or a Como-O, unfortunately. We need to do something with the moveset. I'll have a closer look at Dragalge and see how we can possibly improve it. But for now, has great stats, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little awkward to use, unfortunately. And then we've got Dragonite, A tier for sure. Very effective in the meta despite the stat product. The moveset is what makes Dragonite work. Having access to superpower, being able to hit back on those steel types and rock types is very nice on Dragonite. Does get hardwalled. You got to have the right team behind it, but it is very effective in the meta, particularly as a lead where you can swap out to clear that superpower debuff. And then we've got Drapion, very strong, very versatile, poison type. One of the better poison types you can use, as well as one of the better dark types. A very versatile Pokemon. It functions best as a safe swap in the Ultra League. Has the coverage with Aqua Tail or Sludge Bomb, depending on what your team needs. So yeah, very good stat product as well. Solid B tier. And Drifblim has seen a lot of notoriety recently, but it's still a C tier Pokemon, unfortunately. If I want this type of coverage, I'm just going to go with the bulkier Jellicent, guys. Drifblim has very decent bulk. Guys, would you believe that Chestnut is actually bulkier than Drifblim? A lot of people think that Drifblim is bulkier than it actually is. It's less bulky than Chestnut. Chestnut, I think, comes in at a 4,030-something stat prod, whereas Drifblim comes in at a 4,025, so slightly less bulky than something like a Chestnut. But yeah, still very good. Has that steel coverage with Mystical Fire. It has play on the right team. But if I want a Hex user, I'm just going to go with Jellicent. Has the better water typing as well. And then we make our way to Double. Very good. Normal type pseudo fighter, I would say. The body slam spam is certainly there. I think Double has kind of replaced Obstagoon in terms of coverage and that sort of pseudo fighter role for a normal type. Yeah, just a much more pricier version. I think Obstagoon is just sort of the more budget-friendly version of something like a Double, but Double has the bulk in the spam for sure. Empoleon, very, very spicy these days, and I never thought I would ever think that about Empoleon. There was once where it was a pretty top-tier meta, but yeah, has fallen off a bit. But I will say, if you want to counter a Steelix or a Charizard, Empoleon is your Pokemon. Holy smokes. But yeah, that's about all it's really good for, unfortunately. Escavalier is a very solid anti-meta Pokemon. I'm going to say C tier. I'm not going to go too crazy with Escav. The Aerial Ace buff was very nice for this, and that is what I would recommend running in the place of Megahorn. It gives it excellent coverage up against grass and bug types like Golisopod or Virizion. It just gets a little hard-walled. It sort of runs into a brick wall with Pokemon like Giratina or even Charizard can really give this thing trouble. So yeah, the stats, lack of stat product does hold it back a bit. Very similar to Galvantula, but I will go ahead and give Galvantula the respective B tier. You need to have the right team because it does get hard-walled by Giratina, but an excellent answer to psychic types like Cresselia and Deoxys. It also handles Tapu Fini quite well, handles Jellicent quite well, definitely has a place in the meta. Gengar, again, another one, much like Empoleon, was top meta back in the day, but my goodness, there are just better ghost types to run and consider than Gengar. It's very squishy, which it makes it very challenging and difficult to run. Giratina was once S tier. I think it's been dropped down a peg, much like Cresselia. Steelix in the meta sort of dropped this thing down, but Giratina is still Giratina at the end of the day, guys. Let's not get it twisted. I would say still very good, just not S tier anymore. Almost said Gligar, Gliscor, very strong ground / flying type. I'll give it the respect of B tier, very solid. It can get held back by the strong water types like Swampert and Tapu Fini, of course. And if you don't have Aerial Ace, it can actually get a little dicey up against Pokemon like Virizion. So, still very strong in the meta. Very, very good anti-Registeel Pokemon, I should say. That's its redeeming quality. It shuts down Registeel. Greedent, man, oh man, where do we put old Greedent? Holy smokes. I almost want to put it in A tier, guys. I almost want to do it. I'm gonna do it. I might get some flack for that. It may be more realistically B tier, but I'm gonna go ahead and say A tier because, of course, with Mudshot, it is about as spammy as it gets now. It's an excellent generalist, shuts down Giratina, has very good play up against Cresselia. It does get hard-walled by the swords, most notably Cobalion, but it can put in the work. The spamminess and the bulk really does well for Greedent for sure. Easily, I would say the best normal type in the meta, I would say. Very strong generalist, very good safe swap as well. Guzzlord, man, last season I would have said B tier, but I'm gonna go ahead and say C tier. It's just Steelix. Steelix exists. I mean, we had enough of a challenge with Pokemon like Tapu Fini in the meta. It's just Steelix has really knocked this thing down, but still solid C tier. Gyarados is very spicy these days. Again, much like a lot of these, like Empoleon, it was once top tier meta. It's just better Pokemon. I think I would just go with Dragonite these days over something like a Gyarados for sure. Incineroar, very spicy. They keep buffing this thing, but I think it's just not gonna see much play until it gets Blast Burn, unfortunately. They gave it Double Kick a few seasons back. Just this season, they gave it Blaze Kick. It just needs Blast Burn, and we'll see. But for now, it's D tier, very spicy. Jellicent, S tier for sure. The bulk is quite nice on Jellicent. A very good answer to Cobalion and Charizard in the meta. Has play up against Cresselia and Giratina, although those two can fight back for sure. But Jellicent, about as good as it gets. Very strong S tier, ghost type / water. Como-O is a solid B tier, dragon / fighting type. Very underutilized. Very bulky, much bulkier than something like a Dragonite, which has very similar coverage. So, yeah, if you're finding a bit of a struggle with the lack of bulk on Dragonite, Como-O might be worth considering if you happen to have one. But of course, Dragonite has had a calm day, much more accessible than Como-O. I would say Como-O is just, Dragonite's just a more budget-friendly, I think, option, I would say, more accessible. Lantern, very spicy in the meta, although it serves a very unique purpose. Shuts down this guy, Charizard, quite well, shuts down Jellicent very well, and although it doesn't come anywhere near the 2,500 CP limit, still has the bulk in the Ultra League. I think it's right around 4,000, maybe even a 4,100 stat product, which is absolutely insane, coming in less than 2,400 CP at its max. So yeah, Lantern, very interesting. Still very spicy and limited. It's sort of just sort of shuts down Charizard and Jellicent effectively. That's its redeeming quality, as well as other water types. Lapras has seen better days. I would still even go with the nerfed Walrein over Lapras. Just a little slow with the ice shards. Licky, very strong normal type. You just go with Snorlax, I think. That's the more cost-effective option. Licky is very pricey, and you do need an Elite Charge TM to get Body Slam on it, but it has access to Shadow Ball. Believe it or not, it's actually the bulkiest normal type in the meta. Blissey, of course, notwithstanding, as far as functional normal types, Licky is the bulkiest normal type in the entire meta. Bulkier than Snorlax even, and bulkier than Greedent, but very expensive. Lurantis is just very spicy. The stats aren't quite there, and it's a very pricey XL build. If you want a good, if you want that type of coverage, you just go with Virizion, guys. Plain and simple. Same thing with Machamp. If you want that type of spammy fighting type coverage, you just go with Virizion or Cobalion, unfortunately. Mandibuzz, A tier for sure. Very strong in the meta, Mandibuzz. Aerial Ace, the buff, has worked wonders in both the Great League and in the Ultra League. Mandibuzz, very good. A tier dark type / flyer. Meganium is a C tier. It has its merits. I think if you want a community day grass type, you just go with Venusaur. Unfortunately, I don't think it's quite worth the resources if you're still looking to build out your primary Ultra League roster. Same goes for Armored Mewtwo. Was once top tier meta. I think DD is just better. It serves the same purpose, but bulkier and better, I would say. And it runs Confusion, which can hold it back a little bit, but it makes up for that with the bulk. Has a solid moveset as well. I just think DD serves the role a little bit better in the modern meta. Miltank, very similar in terms of investment to Licky. I think if you're going to consider a Miltank, you just go right for Licky. Licky has Shadow Ball, Body Slam, can run Earthquake as well. I just think if you're going to consider this thing, you just go Licky. Although Miltank is spammier for sure with the Body Slam spam. And you don't have to fork over an Elite TM to get Body Slam on it. But yeah, I mean, if you want a bulky normal type, for my humble opinion, if you're going to make the XL investment, you go Greedent. If you are on a budget, you just go Snorlax, plain and simple. Alolan Muck, very solid B tier, dark / poison type, very similar to Drapion in terms of typing, not nearly as spammy. Drapion's better. I would say something like a Skuntank is even better, but if you're on a budget, A-Muck, definitely the way to go. Very similar, Kanto Muck as well. Very similar coverages for both of those. I generally lean towards Kanto Muck. If I'm going to choose between these two, I generally go Kanto Muck, believe it or not. Both have the stats, but I just like the Thunder Punch coverage. Both have Dark Pulse as well. Alolan Ninetales, solid A-tier Charmer. The best Charmer still in the meta. Yeah, A9 is just A9 for sure. And you can run it in a more dynamic fashion with Powder Snow as well. Noctowl is about as irrelevant as it gets. And then we've got Obstagoon is a solid C-tier dark / normal type. Again, Double has sort of filled that role, but if you're on a budget, Obstagoon for sure, if you need that type of coverage, is the way to go. Pelipper is sort of a luxury investment, I would say. If you want a spammy flyer, you're just going to go Charizard. And if you want a spammy water type, you're going to go with Swampert. Plain and simple. Pelipper, definitely more of a luxury type of build. XL build, I will say. And then we've got Berserker. A strong anti-meta Pokemon, best suited for the limited metas, I would say, like the Fantasy Cup or any other type of limited format, I would say. And Pidgeot, PV Poke would have this thing at beyond S tier. It would be beyond everything. It would be, off the charts. Those of you who are always on PV Poke will know exactly what I'm referring to. It's not S tier. I'm going to say solid A tier for sure for Pidgeot. And you do have your choice of Aerial Ace or Feather Dance these days, as Aerial Ace did get a buff. Much more flexible with Aerial Ace, I would say. That's the way I would go if I were to ever run Pidgeot in the Ultra League. Pidgeot is Pidgeot for sure. I think we all know the deal with that. Politoed is very spicy, D tier. Again, if I want a spammy water type, I'm not going to dump 500k dust and the XL investment when I could just go with Swampert. Plain and simple. But not so much with Poliwrath. I might say A/B tier. I'll give it the respect of A tier, but although it probably should go on the B tier, but it can easily be A tier, and that's where I'm going to put it. Very strong, very bulky. It gets hard walled up against Pokemon like Tapu Fini, but it does have coverage for Giratina and others in the meta. Very strong fighting/water type. But I can't say the same for Primarita in terms of a strong water type. They're just better Charmers. We will see. We've got a good start with Disarming Voice. We'll see when it gets Hydro Cannon. It might be a different story then, but until then, it is very limited. Same goes for Regice. Regice, very spicy. I think best suited for the limited metas. Regirock, however, very good, very strong. This Pokemon is thoroughly underrated and underutilized. Very bulky, not as bulky as Registeel, but actually bulkier than Giratina. Would you have ever guessed? This Pokemon, I don't know why it's not used more than it should be. Has the moves, has the bulk, should definitely be considered for a lot of Ultra League teams. And then we've got Registeel, about as S tier as it gets. I don't think we even need to dive into that. We all know the deal with Registeel. Runerigus is very spicy and very limited. It's a D tier Pokemon. Same goes for Scizor. Very limited for its stat product. It's best suited for the limited metas, I would say. Scrafty, very solid, fighting/dark type, very strong. I would say B tier fighting/dark type. Has dropped off in terms of usage a little bit. I think most people would just prefer to use Cobalion. Most people would just rather use Cobalion. And then we've got Surfetched, very limited. I'm going to go ahead and say it's quite spicy. Best suited for the limited formats, unfortunately. Just the stats are just not there for it. And then we've got Skarmory, has seen better days. Holy smokes. Enough said. D tier, very irrelevant. And then we've got Snorlax, very, very solid. I think you just go Greedent these days, but if you're on a budget, you don't have the resources, Snorlax is the next best thing as far as a bulky normal type that can cover Ghosts and Psychics with Body Slam. And then Steelix, again, much like Registeel, is about as S tier as it gets. Holy smokes, has this thing been drastically improved with Breaking Swipe. We all know the deal with Steelix. Holy smokes, about as S tier as it gets. And then G-Fisk once would have been where Steelix is, but the unnecessary Earthquake nerf has really drastically knocked this thing down a few pegs, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it is what it is. The Earthquake nerf has hurt it. Swampert, A tier, 1000%. A lot of you would even have it at S tier, but I'm not going to go that far. Very good, spammy water type. We know Swampert is Swampert at the end of the day. Sylveon, the second best Charmer in the meta, I would say, has excellent stats. Similar pacing to A9. It's just not quite. It doesn't quite get there as fast. I'll go ahead and say C tier. And you can even run it in a more dynamic fashion, much like with A9 with Quick Attack if you wanted to. Talonflame. Oh man, where do we put Talonflame? It's C tier. You just go Charizard, plain and simple. Charizard's far more accessible and far more effective than a Talonflame, I would say. Tapu Fini. I'm gonna say A tier. It's good. It's just having to rely on Water Gun can be a bit awkward and difficult to use. It just takes forever to get to the moves when you really need to get there, but still very good at shutting down Charizard, shutting down Steelix, as well as Cobalion. So yeah, Tapu Fini, very good A tier. Water type slash fairy. Togekiss. Quite spicy. I would really like to see Togekiss get Fairy Wind one day. If it gets that, look out. It might be elevated quite a bit. But for now and until then, you just go with Sylveon or A9 for sure. Toxicroak, very solid anti-meta fighter slash poison type. Why Toxicroak is effective now, of course, is because of Registeel, Steelix, gets shut down by the ghost types and the flyers. If you get locked onto a Giratina, you're in trouble, but it can shut down the steel types quite effectively, as well as both of the Swords of Justice. That is why Toxicroak has seen a lot of usage. That's its redeeming quality. Trevenant was once S tier, now B tier, still one of the better grass types you can use. It's just been the pacing nerf was not good for Trevenant, let's just say, but still has its place in the meta. What doesn't really have its place in the meta, unfortunately, is Typhlosion. You just go with Charizard. I mean, if you want an Incinerate user, you can go Talonflame over that as well. Umbreon, very strong. A tier dark type for sure. Very similar to Mandibuzz. I would give Mandibuzz the slight edge just because it has the fighting coverage. It only takes neutral from fighting, and it can hit the fighters for super effective. Much better up against Virizion, I would say. But still very, very solid. A tier dark type, I would say. Venusaur, C tier grass type. I think I would still use Trev over Venusaur. Trev has a lot more better coverage, better suited for an open meta. Venusaur still very solid, much better suited for a premier format, I would say. Virizion, about as S tier as it gets. You can run it with Stone Edge or Leaf Blade. If you run Leaf Blade, you're a little bit more alignment dependent, but the fact that it can shut down Steelix, Registeel, Cobalion, has play up against Jellicent, although a very highly ranked Jellicent can tank two Leaf Blades. Two Leaf Blades will not KO a very highly ranked Jellicent, but it still puts in the work and can still beat Jellicent as well as Tapu Fini and all other water types. So yeah, Virizion, about as S tier as it gets. Very, very strong Pokemon. Walrein was once S tier as well. It's very much C tier now. Much like with G-Fist, the Earthquake nerf has really hurt Walrein. I don't know why they did that to Walrein. I don't think it deserved that. They just took a very strong ice type out of the meta, unfortunately. Yeah, very unfortunate. I hope they get I hope that they still buff Bulldoze and give it to Walrein. I think that would bring it much more to prominence. Clefable, very strong B tier fairy type. Very, very effective closer. Very good at pressuring shields on the opponent. It's just limited because it can't fight back up against Steel, unfortunately. Credeli, very spicy, best suited for the limited metas. Golisopod, almost S tier. I'm gonna go ahead and say S tier for Golisopod. Should probably be on the A tier, but I'm gonna say S tier because it has been buffed to the moon and is easily one of the best Pokemon in the entire meta right now. That's just because it can cover a lot of things, can beat Virizion with Aerial Ace, has play up against Steelix, limited up against Reggie, but has play up against ghost types like Jellicent and Giratina. Can shut down a Cresselia or a DD. Yeah, Yeah, I'm going to say S tier for that Gliscod. One of the best Pokemon in the meta. Haxorus still very spicy, best suited for limited metas. Same goes for Kingdra, unfortunately. Same for Melmetal, still very spicy. Nidoqueen, much more of an anti-meta Pokemon these days. I'll give it the respect of B tier. Has the ground coverage for Steel. Shuts down Registeel like you wouldn't believe. Has play up against Tapu Fini, as well as other fairies, of course. Can shut down Cresselia if Cresselia is running the conventional moveset. So yeah, much more of a very strong anti-meta Pokemon these days. Sandslash, I would say, is S tier for sure. Nothing shuts down a Giratina or a Cresselia quite like an Alolan Sandslash. So yeah, very strong. Has play up against Charizard as well. You just keep it away from those Swords of Justice if you can. Also shuts down Steelix and has very strong play up against Registeel. So yeah, S tier for sure. Skuntank, I'm going to say very strong. I almost want to say A tier. I'll go ahead and say B tier. Very strong Poison Jabber. A little bit of a different dynamic than something like a Drapion. Yeah, very good. Very good A tier Poison type. Same goes for G-Weezing, I would say. Very dynamic and flexible Pokemon. You can run Play Rough for optimal flexibility. And then if you want that steel coverage, you can go with the Overheat. Very spammy with Brutal Swing as well. Very versatile Pokemon. Very similar in terms of versatility to something like a Drapion. Although it's not a Dark type, but it has that coverage. Blastoise, very pricey. You have to XL it. I just think it needs a better coverage move, I will say. If you want a bulky water gun user, you just go with Tapu Fini. Has the fairy typing as well. Greninja, A tier, 1000%. This thing, probably the best closer in the entire meta right now, guys. If you have the right strategy for Greninja, holy smokes, can it sweep in a game? Yeah, Greninja, A tier, 1000%. Heliolisk, I'm gonna give it the respect of B tier. Should maybe be on the C tier, but I'll give it the respect of B tier. Very much improved with Breaking Swipe, 1000%. Hitmontop, I'll give it the respect of C tier. Should really be D tier, but very much improved with Triple Axle. It's just a very pricey luxury fighting type investment. If you want a counter user, you can just go with something like a Scrafty. Scrafty also boosts its attack with the power-up punches, much like this thing with Triple Axle. Magnezone is C tier. If you want a Volt Switch user, you just go with Ampharos or Heliolisk, to be honest. Skeledirge, very strong B tier fire type / ghost type. I'm sure a lot of you want to put this on the A tier, but I'm not going that far. It's a solid B tier, even without a Community Day move, guys. Excellent moveset on this thing. It just, the 5-turn fast move does hold it back, but if this thing ever got Shadow Claw, holy smokes, I think that would be S tier, but until then, we'll see. Tentacruel, very strong B tier Poison Jabber for sure. Could even make a strong case for A tier. It's just, you really only have nuke moves with this thing. We'll see if it ever gets a proper bait move. We'll see. But for now, solid B tier. And same goes for Ampharos, very similar to Heliolisk. They both serve a very similar role, although Ampharos does have the dark coverage for the ghost types. You really only want that, I guess, for Cress as well. So yeah, very similar to Heliolisk. And then Kyurem, I'm going to say C tier for sure. So yeah, that's how I would rank everything. That's how I would prioritize everything in terms of what to build and what to prioritize, what to really hunt for whenever things are out spawning. So yeah, that's my tier list for Ultra League. I really enjoyed doing these, and I hope you all enjoyed as well. But guys, I had a blast. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, I thank you for watching, and keep up the grind. Thank you, guys.